Just starting to find these. These are one of my favorite spring edibles. I had to include this in this video of favorite mushrooms of Michigan that aren't morels. These are, the proper pronunciation is Gyromitra brunnier. I'm never going to call them that because I got a different name for them. This seam that follows the mushroom is usually one of the most distinguishing features. If you look at the mushroom, it'll kind of undulate and fold upon itself from a very thick white stem. And they grow before the morels usually. It's a delicious edible mushroom that belongs in a list of Michigan mushrooms that are as good or better than morel mushrooms, at least in my opinion. These are my favorite spring edible, and they happen to be Dawn's favorite spring edible. Fairly easy to identify. These seams are prominent, even on some species that have been kind of pushed together. You can see the seam right here, so it would, even though at a glance it might look like Gyromitra and Silas, it is a brunnier. Thick white stem, folding up onto itself with a seam, and growing in the same location as your typical morel mushroom. Here we have two edible and delicious, in my opinion, mushrooms in the Morcheliaceae family. This is Morchella punctipes, being that we're in Michigan, and this is Verpa conica. The slug ate a hole in that right there, but this is what the cap would normally look like. They call it the thimble cap. It'll have a loosely stuffed hollow stem, and it'll be loosely stuffed with a cottony substance that with age will start to turn clear. The half-free morel gets its name because right here you can see that half of its cap hangs free rather than being connected to the stem. Verpa conica, see if I can cut this one in half here. You can see it is stuffed with this cottony substance, otherwise hollow. You can see it's loosely stuffed. And the cap, of course, attaches to the stem at the very, very, very tip. Sometimes this cap can be slightly wrinkled. Whoops. And there's not a lot of mushroom there to eat, but usually when you find them, you find a lot of them. It's not common in Michigan, but when they fruit, a lot of them fruit. This one's a little bit older. A delicious mushroom. If you find it, fry it just like you would any other Morchella, and I think you'll be delighted in its flavor. Hi guys, this is my foraging table that Dawn gets aggravated with on many occasions. Right now it needs some sorting. But what I wanted to show you guys are some mushrooms that are better than and or equal to Morchella. This is the black trumpet. The black trumpet is relatively easy to identify. With a magnifying glass, sometimes you can see ridges or folds along the fertile surface here. Typically it is hollow, tube-shaped. This mushroom I put above Morchella and everyone's opinion varies, but this is actually so delicious, and it's one of the mushrooms I seek, and I look for it, and I treasure my spots more than any other. The black trumpet is a crateralis species. It likes old growth oak. It can vary in color, and it is hollow, like I said, very thin and fragile, really fruity smelling. This is a delicious mushroom. I do dehydrate some of them, and then I'll powder it and take that powder. The jar always smells like heaven when you open it, really fruity smelling. And I will infuse this in chocolate and pass it out for Christmas stocking stuffers. The black trumpet crateralis is definitely, in my opinion, more prized, and in my household more prized, than Morchella. The next mushroom I want to show you that's equal to is the hedgehog. Now this doesn't have gills, it doesn't have pores, it has spines. And when these get bigger, you just take a knife and scrape those spines right out. They fall right off. In my mind, the spines make it a little bit bigger, but this is a good mushroom to add to plenty of dishes. Beef stroganoff, beef and noodles, chicken and noodles, even in scrambled eggs. The hedgehog mushroom is definitely equal to Morchella in this house. And here is two. I just want to differentiate the two for you. See if I have a prime example. I pick buttons, that's why these are small examples. But if you look at the top of these mushrooms, they look similar, if not the same. You might think that they're the same mushroom. But one is the hygrogorphus milky and the other is the voluminous milky, or the apricot. One has an odor of fish and the other one doesn't. Both will stain brown when you strike the gills. The latex will come out, and about 20 minutes later it'll stain brown. Also a delicious mushroom. Chanterelles. There's two examples of chanterelles, which I consider to be, in their right place, better than Morchella. And one of the reasons I say that is a much more universal and colorful mushroom. I usually just use the cinnabar chanterelles for color. They're not as flavorful as any of the yellow varieties of yellow chanterelles that we have. And basically, for chanterelles, what we're going to do with Latin names is, knowing it's incorrect because the European taxons is Cantharellus cibarus and Lateridius, one the smooth chanterelle and the other the golden chanterelle here in Michigan. Our placeholders, the DNA sequencing is changing that. But chanterelles are definitely table worthy, definitely equal to, if not better than, Morchella, and definitely more universal of a mushroom to forage and eat. Delicious mushrooms, also colorful. Hope you guys get out and enjoy them soon. Oh, I forgot. The indigo milky. Here is a good example of the indigo milky. This is an older specimen, and this is the choice specimen. Note the enrolled margin. Now with an indigo milky, you can hardly see it, but there are zones on it. And a lot of times when this gets older and opens up, It'll be vase shaped and hold water and leaves and frogs and salamanders and maybe even mosquito larvae. But on an indigo milky, the hollow stalk is hollow or loosely stuffed. It exudes a blue latex. It's usually scant, but it exudes a blue latex nonetheless. And that blue latex will stain your fingers, maybe even lipstick. Who knows? But the indigo milky is also an interesting mushroom. You can't really smell it close up and get the proper fragrance of an indigo milky, but when you have them in a basket and you're walking along, you can definitely smell them. I call it the faraway smell. You can smell them at a certain distance and they smell just so wonderful, but when you put it to your nose, somehow that fragrance is lost a little bit. But the indigo milky is definitely a choice mushroom if it's cooked low and slow, and you pick prime fresh specimens. The older specimens will feel gritty in texture when you eat them, and part of that reason, I like how that turned blue like that, part of that reason is that the gills just are, the texture's different than the actual cap. But definitely a choice mushroom cooked low and slow, and definitely good in stroganoff, definitely good in beef stews, definitely good in soups, great in omelets. The indigo milky is definitely equal to the morchella. Here's a mushroom that I think belongs in this video. Note the top of that. The top of it has kind of a cornbread look. And the bottom of it has a porous surface, really tight pores. It can be white to cream. The stem is the same color. Sometimes it has some odd embellishments to it. If you've watched many of my videos, you'll see that this mushroom is in there quite often. And the reason it's in there quite often is because I seek this mushroom out quite often. I think it belongs in this video. I don't think it's better than a morchella, but I do think that there are recipes that you can do with this mushroom that certainly make it even. When you cut this, one of the telltale signs is that it turns this beautiful cobalt blue. All surfaces stain this cobalt blue. Also, when you dehydrate it, it stays this color, making the color kind of a cool thing in cooking as well. The pores of this will stain. Another interesting feature of this particular mushroom is the stalk is either loosely stuffed or hollow, and that is a great identification feature. So cornbread colored top, cornbread colored stem, tight white to cream pores, and all parts of this mushroom smudge. I can leave my thumbprint right here. And the top. It's a really cool mushroom. And like I said before, when you dehydrate it, it stays this beautiful blue color, which is really cool. And I like this in a cream sauce. And I put it over pork steak more than I do any other meat. But this is an excellent mushroom that kind of holds seasonings well without stepping on anything. And the texture, once it's dehydrated and rehydrated, is excellent. This is the cornflower bolete or the blooming bolete. Lobster mushrooms are notoriously dirty. I try to get as much dirt off of them as I can before they go in the basket. But they are very much worth cleaning the dirt. You'll cut these in half and you'll make sure you get all the rot or the buggies out and get all the dirt out with a mushroom brush. Sometimes you do have to slosh them in the sink. It's inevitable. The lobster mushroom is actually a parasitized mushroom. This Hypomyces lactiflorum can infect or parasitize a few different species, Rusula and Lactarius. Rusula brevipies, I do believe. This mushroom here is my number 2 mushroom. It's absolutely astounding. I like to slice it and half saute it and then add it to a homemade pizza. It's delicious. I like to slice it, half saute it, and then add it to omelets. It's really good. It's great in beef stroganoff. This is a cooker's mushroom. It is a chef's mushroom. It's astounding. So when I say that this mushroom is better than a morel, it's because morels are usually eaten on the side and not really a chef's mushroom, although dishes with morels are definitely delicious and I'm not knocking it. This mushroom is definitely a notch above a morel mushroom, the lobster. They're difficult to find. They're very dirty, as you can see, and the trouble with cleaning them is well worth the taste and flavor. You can see the gills on what used to be, I'm guessing, because I've seen a few around here, Rusula brevipies, the gills are just gone. They're just kind of fused into one zombie of a mushroom, I guess is one way of putting it. It's not technically correct, but it's still a fun way of putting it. If there's a zombie of a mushroom, it would be this one. There are many species of Hypomyces, and I do not remember exactly the relationship between them, but because of it, it turns what would be an inedible or less palatable mushroom into something absolutely extraordinary and delicious. The majority of the time they are blushed with deep red, orange, and yellow hues. Every now and then you get a lobster that's kind of flushed white, blushing yellow a little bit, but deep oranges and reds and yellows are what we find in lobster mushrooms. What we have here is emerging Fistulina hepatica. And right over here, I just cut this one. This is one of my favorite mushrooms to find in Michigan, mostly because it's not common in Michigan, or at least not as common as it is, say, in Appalachia. But Fistulina hepatica can have a pink porous surface. It can be white, depending on age and environment, I'm assuming. The top is usually rough and textured as it's young and fresh. It's a wet mushroom. And when you cut into it, it'll be streaked and moist, and it'll resemble meat. This mushroom can be eaten raw if soaked in vinegar, and it's a very twangy mushroom. The more you cook it, the more it becomes kind of portobello-ish as far as flavor goes. I like this mushroom raw, and I like it lightly sauteed. But it is definitely a favorite mushroom. It definitely is equal to or more Shella, and belongs in this video. Also, Dawn and I are going to have to do a part 2 to mushrooms that are as good as or better than morel mushrooms, because we didn't find the umbrella polypore this year, and there's many more very good mushrooms to come in the later season of the year. So we'll make this the final mushroom of part 1. Fistulina hepatica, poor man's steak, ox tongue, and some people even call it beefsteak. It prefers dead oak, And in Michigan, when you find this, sometimes you can get multiple cuttings once you find it in a specific location. Dawn and I just watered this emerging one because we're in a dry spell, and I've been known to water my trees. But look for the beefsteak. Hopefully you can find one and get to try it. It's a beautiful, tangy, and tasty mushroom. The flavor is definitely unique and unlike any other mushroom you've tasted, I promise.